Hi, welcome back. This tutorial is going to cover the general settings of WordPress. You can access the general settings by logging into your WordPress site and going to Settings. Within these settings are General, Writing, Reading, Discussion, Media, and Permalinks. Now, certain plugins may add some additional settings into this area, but we're not going to cover those right now. So WordPress is a lot like getting a new cell phone. It's very useful, it's very powerful, but it does require some setup before you can actually do anything productive with it. One of the first items to set up is the title. This is frequently the name of your website. So if your website's name was Acme Widgets, you would put in Acme Widgets as your site title. If your company had a tagline of the best widgets ever, you would put that in as your tagline. Now, something very important is the WordPress address URL and the site address URL. These are the web equivalent of setting the phone number in your new cell phone. This should normally be set up already for you, and you should not play with these. Any little typo, even so much as a single space character, incorrectly added to one of these two items will completely break your website. It would basically be like somehow changing the phone number on your phone without that phone number being updated at the carrier, and suddenly your phone is useless. So do not touch either of these two fields unless you really know what you're doing. Email address. This is the email address used for general notifications on the website. Frequently, this will be set as the default address on contact forms. This will be notified if a new user is registered. All sorts of notifications will be sent to this email address. So, make it something valid, because if there is an issue with the website, it gets sent here. Next is membership. Normally, you only turn this on if you are specifically going to be running a membership website. If you are going to be running a membership website, you need to check with the membership plugin to see how it works and see if you actually need to check this box or not. New user default role. This is the role that a new user will be assigned by default. For example, let's say you run an e-commerce store with WooCommerce. You would most likely assign your new user default role as customer, because most people who would be registering on your site would be customers. By default, it's set to subscriber. Subscriber has the fewest privileges in WordPress. Administrator has the most privileges in WordPress. Time zone. It's pretty straightforward. It's the time zone that you want used. There is typically only 1 or 2 cities per time zone, so just pick a city in the same time zone as you. I live in Pennsylvania, so I've picked New York as my time zone. Date format. This is just how you want dates on your website to be printed by default. There are a whole bunch of other ways to overwrite this. This is just defaults. Time format. Again, just the defaults. Week starts on Monday. Again, it's just a default. And site language. This is pretty important as it will change the language of your WordPress backend. I live in the US and I speak English, so I've picked United States English. There's also UK English and a number of others. Whenever you make a change that you want to keep, you will need to click on Save Changes. The next page is writing. You've got a few different settings here. Most of the time, you don't need to deal with them. Formatting. You can convert emoticons to their actual graphics. This is an optional setting. By default, it is turned on. If you have a number of post categories and you want to set the default of which post category new post should be assigned to, you can set that here. You can also set your default post format here. Most people stick with standard. Post via email. Most people do not use the post via email setting. If you want to, you can set up the appropriate settings here. Next up, we have reading. For the reading settings, this is actually quite important, what your front page displays. So in general settings, you set up the URL of your WordPress site. Now you need to tell WordPress what page it should display at that URL. Your two options are, it can display your latest posts, or option 2, you can pick any page on your site and have that be displayed. In this case, I have picked Home to be displayed as the front page at my WordPress URL. And then I have also assigned my blog posts to a blog page. Blog pages will show at most 10 posts. This is the default. If you want to only show 5 posts on your blog pages, you can just show 5. Syndication feed. This is if you are going to be using RSS. Now, RSS is set up by default with WordPress. This is just whether you want to actually show it. For the articles in the feed, do you want them to show the complete article or just a summary? By default, the complete article is selected, but it's your choice. Search engine visibility. Now, this is a demo site, so I don't actually want search engines to index it. Therefore, I have checked discourage search engines. However, most sites, once they are live on the internet, you want to make sure this box is unchecked. Next up is discussion. So here we have the default settings. Attempt to notify any blogs linked from an article. I have installed a plugin that actually overrides these settings, but this attempt to notify is just if you put a link in one of your posts to another website, your website will attempt to notify that website that it's been linked to. That's what this says. Other settings. Comment author must fill out name and email. That is pretty standard. Users must be registered and logged into comment. This is if you want to force people to have an account on your website in order to place a comment. Automatically close comments on articles. If you wish to only allow commenting on articles for a certain period of time and then automatically close that, you can check this. Enable nested comments. This just allows a reply to a comment to be nested underneath that comment. And break comments into pages. This is just a little bit for SEO and page speed. Just breaking the comments into multiple pages if you get a lot of them. And then last, comments should be displayed with older comments at the top or newer comments. It's up to you. And then you can have it email you whenever anyone posts a comment and or when a comment is held for moderation. The difference between these two settings, let's say you automatically approve comments for people who have already placed at least one comment. Then you would be notified every time they add a new comment, whereas this tells you every time a comment is held for moderation. So they're slightly different. And here is whether or not a comment appears. If the comment author has a previously approved comment, you can allow them to automatically get their next comment approved, so it doesn't have to be moderated. That's a choice. Comment moderation, to always hold it if it contains more than 2 links. this is a frequent setting. Avatars. WordPress automatically works with Gravatar, which is an internet standard for avatars. This just allows you to select your avatars. Generally speaking, stick with G-rated avatars. Next up are your media settings. Thumbnail size. These are defaults that everything will be set to. Thumbnail is 150 by 150 by default, medium is 300 and large is 1024 1024. Let's say you have a blog and your image and your space available is 700 pixels wide. You might want to set your large size to 700 pixels, because then you can automatically click all of your images will be adjusted to 700 pixels. So that's one way you can use these. Note though, if you do change these sizes, you will need to regenerate your thumbnails, which is a completely separate topic. But just make a mental note of that. Uploading files. Organize uploads into month and year-based folders. This basically just helps to prevent everything from being in one gargantuan folder. And finally, permalinks. So here in Permalinks, you can set the URL structure of your website. By default, it comes with plain permalinks. This would be a URL that looks like this. Now personally to me, $p=123 doesn't have a whole lot of meaning. It also doesn't have a whole lot of meaning to search engines. So I recommend that you go with post name. This will create URLs by default that look like sample post. If that was the title of my post, that would actually be useful and informative. This would help both me and search engines to understand what the heck this is. Now, in order to use anything except for plain, you have to have certain settings available on your web host. Now, these are very standard settings, but you may come across a web host which does not support them. Specifically, I've seen a lot of problems with Windows-based web hosts. WordPress was built to run on a Linux or Unix server, not to run on a Windows server, and I have seen all sorts of various issues trying to run it on Windows servers. So do yourself a favor, get a Linux host. Preferably Linux cPanel or Managed WordPress. It will make your life a whole lot easier. So, I recommend, again, post name, sample post. There are some optional things here. I don't normally use them. It creates some pretty long URLs if you do. Sometimes you do want to use category based though on your posts. For example, if I write a lot of posts about WordPress, so I have told WordPress to put a category base in, which is whatever category I have posted on. It looks like this. Category. So instead of just writing the name of my post, which might be settings in WordPress, so instead of writing settings in WordPress, it would write WordPress/settings in WordPress. Now in this case it's a little bit redundant, but I do write posts on topics besides just settings. Tags work much like categories if you want to include them or not. If you have installed additional plugins, for example WooCommerce, you will see more options here which will control how permalinks for your products are set up. Other plugins will also add some more permalinks. And as always, if you want to save things, click on Save Changes. That's it for now. See you on the next video.